So, chapter 47. Is it 47? Wait a second here. I think so, yes. Yep. Okay. Okay, so Jacob and his family had come down. Joseph arranged it so that Jacob and his family would settle in the land of Goshen. The land of Goshen is in the northern end of Egypt. It is in the delta. So, it fans out into this delta, and then it splits up into all these extra streams. And the Egyptians used a lot of that land as farmland, but they also built cities and ports on it as well. And so they're right up there near the Mediterranean, downriver a ways on one of the side streams. We think we know where they actually specifically lived in that day, and it was we think that they probably were in the city of Erebus, which you can find on maps today. So Joseph went in and told Pharaoh, "My father and my brothers with their flocks and herds and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan. They are now in the land of Goshen." And from among his brothers he took 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to his brothers, "What is your occupation?" They said to Pharaoh, "Your servants are shepherds, as our fathers were." They said to Pharaoh, "We have come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. And now please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen. And if you know any able men among them, put them in charge of my livestock." So in other words, it would be livestock other than sheep and goats. Then Joseph brought in Jacob his father and stood him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many are the days of the years of your life?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their sojourning." In terms of and I don't think he's only speaking just of the amount of time that he's lived. He's talking about the fruit of that time, because he looks back on his life and he sees his sins, and he sees the tribulation, the suffering that he had when Joseph was taken from him and so forth. And now Rachel is dead. Leah's dead. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. Then Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. It's very likely that here, what we see often happen in Genesis is the latter name of a place is put onto a location, because you have to remember when they wrote, when many of these things were written and distributed, they wouldn't know the name of the old names. They'd know their current names. And so it's only natural that they're going to put the name that it's known by near or around the time that it was written, or maybe even slightly updated at some point with what the place name is called. And so just because it says Ramesses does not mean that it had to be called that then. It just has to be the town that is known as Ramses now, even though the name was changed sometime in between. And so these types of things are some of the things that make it difficult to identify a specific place, because the names change and shift. And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with food, according to the number of their dependents. Now there was no food in all the land, for the famine was very severe. In other words, the land was not producing food, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished by reason of the famine. And so this is really fascinating what happens here. Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan in exchange for the grain that they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us foods." In other words, they bought food from Joseph until they had no more money. And because they couldn't raise their own crops, their only alternative was to buy grain from Joseph. They said, "Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? For our money is gone." Joseph answered, "Give me your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock, if your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, and the donkeys. He supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. And when that year was ended, they came to him the following year and said, "We will not hide from my lord that our money is all spent. The herds of livestock are now my lord's. There's nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food. And we with our land will be servants to Pharaoh, and give us seed, that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate." So in other words, I'm assuming he means when the famine's over, give us seed, so that they could replant. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for all the Egyptians sold their flocks because the famine was severe on them. So this is a tremendous consolidation of property and power now into the hands of Pharaoh that he did not have before, because Joseph did not simply give the food away. He made them pay for it. Ultimately it meant they gave their money, they gave their flocks, and then finally their land, and made themselves Pharaoh's servants. As for the people, he made servants of them from one end of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had a fixed allowance from Pharaoh, and they lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them, and therefore they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, "Behold, I have this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here is seed for you, and you shall plant or sow the land, plant it. And the harvests you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh at the harvests, and 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field, and as food for yourselves and your households, and as food for your little ones." And they said, "You have saved our lives. May it please my lord, we will be servants to Pharaoh." So Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt, and it stands to this day, that Pharaoh should have the fifth. The land of the priests alone did not become Pharaoh's. So that was a 20% tax, basically. Not a tithe, but a tax. Thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt and the land of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it, and were fruitful, and multiplied greatly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147. And when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If I have now found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me die with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place." He answered, "I will do as you have said." And he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him then. Then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. The scepter is probably the staff of his bed. The Masoretic text has the wrong vowels on that word. Upon the head of his staff, in other words. He was standing up with his staff, and then he rested his head on his staff in recognition of Joseph's oath. After this, Joseph was told, "Behold, your father is ill." So he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And it was told to Jacob, "Your son Joseph has come to you." Then Israel summoned his strength, and he sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of you a company of peoples, and I will give this land to your offspring for an everlasting possession. Which we just heard about. This is what we had in our Old Testament lesson today.
Did you do that on purpose?
No. And now your 2 sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Jacob is claiming Ephraim and Manasseh as his own sons. So they become the tribes going forward. So you have the tribes of Jacob, of Israel, right? The 12 tribes. One of those tribes was 2 half-tribes, the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Because you notice there's no tribe of Joseph. Interesting, right? Right, so you got the 11 tribes, and then Ephraim and Manasseh are counted as one tribe, half-tribes. Okay.
Why the distinction?
Because Ephraim and Manasseh were 2 separate peoples, but counted in the land allocation as one tribe. But Jacob claims them as his own sons, and so that they would receive the inheritance as sons. Okay. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. And the children that you fathered after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. As for me, when I came from Paddan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath, and I buried her there on the way to Ephrath. That is, he buried her in Bethlehem, on his way to Bethlehem. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, Who are these? Joseph said to his father, These are my sons whom God has given me here. And he said, Please, or bring them to me, please, that I may bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face. And behold, God has let me see your offspring also. Then Joseph removed them from his knees, and he bowed down with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand, and toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and he brought them near him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys, and in them let my name be carried on, the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he took his father's hand and moved it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, Not this way, my father, since this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He shall also become a people, and he shall also be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations. And so, which is, you see, here in Jacob is somewhat being repeated. What happened between him and Esau? He was the younger; he served the elder. Now Jacob is acting on behalf of the Lord as a prophet here, and he says it's going to be the same. Manasseh was born first, but Ephraim will be the one who receives the primary inheritance. He will be the greater of the two. And so that's why Joseph was displeased. And we see that happens. All right. So he blessed them that day, saying, By you Israel will pronounce blessing, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, Behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. Given to you rather than to your brothers. One portion of the land. Okay.
So I wonder if that's where Ephraim and Manasseh then settled. They had that land to settle then when they had reached.
Probably. I'm not sure, but probably.
So it's interesting because then it seems like Israel prepared and had figured out where he wanted his sons to dwell when they were to return.
He doesn't.
He knew that they were to return.
He knew they were going to return, right? Because God had given him the promise that they would return, and so he was, in assigning that land to Ephraim and Manasseh, it was an act of faith, believing God's promises that they would return to the land. All right. So now we have the blessing of the other 11 sons. Of the 11 sons. Okay. 49. Then Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather yourselves together that I may tell you what shall happen to you in days to come." So it is a prophecy of their future, one by one. "Assemble and listen, O sons of Jacob, listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the firstfruits of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed and you defiled it. He went up to my couch." Remember the sin that Reuben committed. He is the firstborn, but he's not the one who receives the primary blessing. "Simon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul come not into their counsel. O my glory, be not joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Judah, your brother shall praise you. Your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him? The scepter. Scepter being a scepter of a king. Well, they had no king. But it's through Judah that the king came. So this is a prophecy of David and David's son, and finally of Christ. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute come to him. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. So he sees Judah, tribe of Judah, the descendant of Judah, not only being the king of Israel, but the king of all peoples, the nations.
So then, who do we know who Solomon was a descendant of?
Who?
Solomon.
Solomon was the son of David.
Not the one who David.
Oh, Saul.
Saul, yeah.
Saul was Benjamin.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. Pretty sure. Okay. All right, continuing. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he has washed his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. I'm not sure what that means about the donkey and the colt bound to the vine.
Which verse is that?
11. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's literally prophetic reference to Christ coming into Jerusalem to die and shed his blood. Zebulun shall dwell at the shores of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey crouching between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good, and that land was pleasant, so he bowed his shoulders to bear and became a servant at forced labor. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper in the path that bites the horse's heels so that his rider falls backwards. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall be at their heels. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal delicacies. Naphtali is a doe let loose that bears beautiful fawns. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him, and harassed him severely, yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. For there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. By the God of your fathers who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you with the blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that crouches beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of my parents, up to the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. And so much of that blessing had already taken place, of course, in the case of Joseph. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil. And to be honest, I do not know what the specifics are referring to for a lot of the blessings of these brothers. But some are quite obvious, particularly Judah. All right. Remember, in the end, there was only the tribe of Judah and Benjamin when it was all done.
Yeah.
All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them as he blessed them, blessing each with the blessing suitable to him. Then he commanded them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field at Machpelah to the east of Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. There I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into his bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. So the phrase "gathered to his people" is common. It's Hebraism. We understand it perfectly well. So it means he died and went to his people. So it's it's also an acknowledgement of the resurrection. That death is not the end. Death is not oblivion. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father after the Egyptian manner. They made a mummy of him. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it, for that is how many are required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for 70 days. And when the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, If I have now found favor in your eyes, please speak in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, I am about to die, in my tomb that I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan. There shall you bury me. Now therefore, please let me go up and bury my father, then I will return. And Pharaoh answered, Go up and bury your father as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. So in other words, they all went up to bury their father. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and grievous lamentation. and made a mourning for his father for 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning by the Egyptians." Therefore the place was called Abel Mitzrayim, the mourning, the mourning of Egypt. It is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had commanded them, for his sons carried him to the land of Canaan, and they buried him in the cave of the field at Machpelah to the east of Mamre, which Abraham bought with the field from Ephron the Hittite to possess as a burying place. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. All right, so now Jacob is buried. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." In other words, Jacob's dead. Maybe Joseph was just waiting until his father was dead before he took vengeance, because his father told him not to. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, 'Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.'" Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also, so in other words, his brothers also continued in penitence even after Jacob died. His brothers came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and for your little ones." And so he comforted them, and he spoke kindly to them. All right, and so as it was with Jacob, now it will be with Joseph. Joseph remained in Egypt, and he and his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years, and Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the 3rd generation. The children also of Machir the son of Manasseh were counted as Joseph's own. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of the land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." And then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. And so Joseph too his body was not to be left. When God brought them back, he said, "Take my bones up with you also." And when we read in Exodus, that is exactly what happened. They did indeed carry him back. And so if we ever identify the exact person who Joseph was in Egypt, and we find his tomb, it should be empty.
Yeah, that verse